You're listening to Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast.
When your heart is aching and your world is shaking, don't give up. No, don't give up.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast. I'm your host, Jana Short, and today I'm with a very special guest, Anne Margolis. Anne is a third-generation guide to mamas birthing babies in her family and has helped thousands of families in her 25 plus years midwifery practice and has personally ushered the births of over 1,000 healthy babies into the world. She has also guided countless human beings to heal from emotional pain, inner stress, and trauma, tap into their strength and power, live fully and vibrantly, and reclaim their radiance, joyfulness, calm, and overall sense of well-being. Oh my gosh, I fell in love. By the way, you've got to check out her Instagram. We're going to put all the links in there, but I found her through Instagram and fell in love with what she's doing. So thank you for being with us today, Anne.
It's a pleasure.
So here's what we do on this show. We just talked about this. We share a story of hope, and I'm just going to let you share away, and I'm just going to sit back and listen.
Well, the story of hope is that, it started out with a story of trauma, right? So I have 4 kids. My first baby, when I went in to have her in the hospital, I did what everyone else was doing. So she just turned 30. So, but what's incredible is things are very similar to like how I experienced it, similar today or worse. So I was an obstetric nurse, so I thought I knew pretty much everything, but I worked in a standard community hospital. I was very young. I was the youngest of all my friends to have a baby. And I took a childbirth class, and I just, like everybody else, went to an obstetrician who spent 5 minutes with me. And I was like, so as things were progressing, I was getting very scared of my own labor because of what I saw in the hospital. It's actually in the hospital where I developed fear of childbirth, because I saw it as an emergency crisis, like waiting, protect from lawsuit. I wasn't seeing normal healthy. I wasn't seeing humanity. I was seeing things that were very scary to me, not just as a nurse, but as an expecting mom now be giving birth on this unit. So of course, when I would say to the doctor, I'm a little nervous about, I was an athlete, I'm a dancer, I'm into yoga. I saw so many cesarean births, and I was just like scared. And he said, oh, don't worry. Like, he never ever spent time with me other than I was just, nothing wrong with you. You're going to be fine. So that was interesting that there was a whole component of my, he was only concerned about the physical aspect of my pregnancy, but we're mind, body, heart, and spirit, right? So I went in very afraid, which is not a good thing. Not a good thing. We need to feel confident and trust in the process, but I was afraid, and I had a right to be afraid because I was seeing what I was seeing. But anyway, I went in and I did when I went into labor, I was given the royal treatment. I was the nurse on the unit having a baby. So you'd think, I was given the royal treatment, but I did what everyone else did. I took off my clothes and put on a hospital gown, which kind of, you think that's innocuous, right? But it kind of makes me then disempowered, sort of a patient who is now going to do whatever you tell me. I have whatever you guys say. I know nothing, right? And that's how I kind of felt. And I was put on, my body needed to move, and I needed to moan, I needed to be up. And they said, no, you need to lie down, and you need to be strapped to a monitor so we can check every, heartbeat of the baby and your contractions, and you can't eat and drink. And I needed to drink, and I needed to, eat. It's like running a marathon, for a mom. And I was told, no, you can't do that. You have to have an IV. So what animal can labor like this, lying down, strapped, right? Not all animals would stop, right? So of course I wasn't laboring as fast as my labor kind of slowed down when I was put in this situation. And I remember the doctor just kept coming in and checking me. He didn't even ask. He's my colleague. I work with him all the time. He just stuck his hands up at the most intimate part of my body, and he would go out and tell my colleague, the nurse, she's still 4. And so I was getting very discouraged. And then my child, I was trying to cope with everything, but I wasn't progressing, and he had me on a time clock. And then I couldn't cope with I heard him say, because I was still 4, give her PIT. Now, I know what that is. I'm fortunate I was a nurse to know what PIT means. Give me the medicine, Pitocin, to make my contractions much stronger and more forceful. And I was scared of that. I knew what that meant. And I told, the nurse comes in, my colleague, and she starts putting it in my IV. And I said, I don't want that. And she says, oh, but honey, you don't want a cesarean. No, I didn't want a cesarean. So, I mean, of course she meant well, but I was feared into it, right? So the PIT went in. And then my childbirth education went out the window, and I couldn't cope with the pain of how intense the contractions were. And you see, what I was seeing as a nurse is all these interventions in normal labor would cause more problems, which would cause more interventions and lead to the OR, which is exactly what happened to me. So then I couldn't cope with the pain, and they gave me an epidural, and then her heart rate went down so dangerously low that it was suddenly a stat section. So now I was the stat section, and everyone's panicked and rushing me into the operating room because her heart rate was so low. Now, I knew as a nurse they had minutes to get her out. And I'm in the operating room by myself, looking at the clock. The assistant surgeon hadn't come yet, and I'm looking at the clock, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, a half an hour. So now I went, 40 minutes, an hour. In my head, I went from, oh my God, we're going to have a damaged baby, to baby's damaged, to she's dead. And that's in my head, right? Suddenly, the epidural must have worked because I started pushing. And then the doctor comes in, and he's calling out orders and things, and he cut a huge episiotomy, and he vacuumed her out with like a baby vacuum. It's like a vacuum they stick on the head. And there was this quiet. And I didn't want to see her. And they were like, congratulations, you have a baby girl. And I had left my body. I was gone. And now I know it's caused PTSD, is post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a traumatic reaction to such an event. She was fine, like physically. I was not fine. So that made me think, first of all, that's a whole story of how I recovered from that. That was a very traumatic experience, but they falsely diagnosed her situation in a hospital. And if they did diagnose it correctly, then she would not have been fine, and they totally disregarded my emotional, physiological reaction to being in that situation. So, I was having I had all the PTSD symptoms, nightmares and anxiety and panic attacks, and even like the thought of returning back to work would send me in such a state, like I was really not doing well. And I had experienced this with other people, but as a nurse, my hands were tied. So a colleague of mine had said to me, why don't you be a midwife? And I'm like, what's that? Like, this was really, literally, I had no idea what a midwife was, but when she told me, I was like, wow, that sounds like I want to do that. And I went to the library, we didn't have internet then, and I read everything about what a midwife is. And I was like, wow, this is me, right? And I went to midwifery school. I spent, master's degree. I went back to school and went to midwifery school. And then, of course, I'm pregnant again. and I was petrified, but I was also now home in a school, believing in the education that I was getting now. It was so contrary to how I ever experienced childbirth. It was returning the power to the mom. Birth is a sacred event in the life of a family. So it was family centered. It was respectful. It was compassionate, and it was that birth works. Like, our heart knows how to beat, and our lungs know how to breathe. Our body knows how to birth. We just have to get out of its way and don't interfere. because then it works. And if we're there, we're trained to prevent problems if there are, and if there's a problem, we can intervene. But when you start meddling in something that's going well, you can do harm. And that's why we have horrid outcome statistics in the United States, the worst in all developed countries, in terms of mothers and babies in childbirth. So I said to my midwife, I believe in this. This is great. We restored the humanity and the process to having a baby, and that women's bodies can do it. But like, I had gone through such a horrible experience my first time. There's no way that I am going to be able to do this. Like, I'm traumatized. And she says, you're going to be fine. It's going to be such a different experience. It's going to be healing. And I said, yeah, but I can't be a midwife unless I viscerally feel that I can do this. Like, I have to do it myself to feel that I can help others do this, whether in the home, hospital, or birthing center. We work, midwives work all, and I've worked in all settings. So that was the most amazing like alchemy for me, or transformation for me, was that it worked for me. Because it was not only that it worked for me, it was healing for me. And because when I was in labor, I wasn't tied down. And she says, go take a shower, go in the bath. We were in the hospital, but she didn't interfere, and she was there as a support. No, sort of just for this calm presence, knowing, that everything was going fine, and encouraging me, and, just believing and seeing, like, I knew she had been very experienced, and she was just very calm, and no time limits, and checking the baby, but not interfering. And in not interfering, that was the most beautiful thing she could have done. And it was her loving support, And when I gave birth, I gave birth. Like, no one took that from me. And I did it naturally. And that was the words that came out of I was in tears saying, I can now convince other people that they can do this, right? If I could do this. That was the most beautiful experience. I wouldn't trade that for the world. And I wanted to scream from the rooftops. And that's like all the families in my practice, they after their births, they say, I want to shout from the mountaintops, the rooftops, that we can do this, So then it became my passion to help families have this experience in all settings. So yes, the name of my practice is Home Sweet Home Birth, but it's Home Sweet Home Birth in all settings. Especially in the hospital, we need to take back birth, because what happened to me is still happening, and happening worse. Like, I'm hearing from people around the world about how traumatic their experience is, and what I'm hearing is just, it hasn't changed. It's gotten worse. So that I'm just on a mission, like, to improve birth around, especially in the westernized countries, because, I also love providing midwifery care for the immigrant populations that come from, we get a lot of people that just walk over the border and somehow walk up to New York, and they show up in the hospital. They don't have any insurance. They show up in the clinic. They don't speak any English. And it's not a big deal to them. They just give birth. It's like they're surrounded by a community, and they're back at home where they're from, and they eat healthy. They eat. There's no Walmarts and junk food, Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's down there. They just eat what fish and what grows, what they can gather, and they have a lot of community support. Birth at home is very normal. It's a part of normal family life. They're surrounded by it, and they're also not freaked out by difficulty and pain. They just do it. Like, they don't need any childbirth class. They're just, their grandmother had 11 babies at home. So it's like, it's not a big deal for them. So I love helping. I love enabling them to have a beautiful, wonderful experience in the hospital. But I work also with the westernized woman and family who Google everything. And, I want to enable them to have a home sweet home birth like experience in the hospital. It can be done. Absolutely can be done. If I can do it, and anyone can do it. So, and then I started getting involved in trauma healing, because the trauma lives in our body. It's not something you can talk about. I can talk to a therapist over and over again and just re-trigger the trauma, the response in my body. So there's way that I got into clarity breath work, which is ways to heal the trauma from the body. So a lot of people want to know, I had an awful, horrible, traumatic experience, my first baby. How can I go into the next birth and not have that trauma and have a better experience, the next time? So sometimes we really do have to work on healing that trauma and then really inviting this new experience in. So that became, how do we do this? That became my course and my book. And so there's such a story of hope, because you know what? And all these babies that I've caught, I have not, when all was going well, I have not once had to had a mom say, I can't do this. We need to have a cesarean, or we need to, I need an epidural or something like that. And I'm not dealing with, the population is so varied. Lawyers, doctors, accountants, CEOs of companies, Broadway actresses, actors, homeschooling moms, teachers. I mean, not hippies. I'm talking. I have a wide variety of people coming to my practice, and from all different kinds of cultures and backgrounds. And they don't have different bodies. They just have a mindset. And so I encourage them to take back their birth, take back their experience, which is work. You have to take responsibility for your health now. You can't just let other people take it, because you are the one that needs to, you are the one, we are the ones. We have to advocate for ourselves and have to set up our own support and practice techniques and shift our mindset. And, to create the birth that we want. But it's possible, so possible. So that's the hope, that it takes work, but it's possible, totally possible and doable. I see it all the time.
I love it. And you know what? I never have ever heard anyone tell me before and tell you that you can get PTSD from childbirth. And I will tell you that I totally see that, because mine were so traumatic that when I see pictures of moms holding their babies and sobbing, and that first moment on skin to skin contact, it makes me weep, because that wasn't for me. It never happened for me. I felt so disconnected from the child that I just gave birth. And it took me months to build that bond with them, because I didn't have that opportunity. I was in fear, and I related that fear to my child. And so it took a while to get in that space with them, where I had those moments with every single one of them. They were always very fearful births, because of all the stuff that was going on around me.
Yeah, and just what a lot. It's considered the same reaction that a woman would have as same as rape, and so there are big organizations, like global organizations, talk about improving birth, and stop obstetric violence that's going on in a lot of these hospitals, because women feel it's a similar reaction to rape. It's things that are happening against their consent, with very high intense emotions in their most intimate areas, right? So and it's the rates are increasing, and I'm just astounded by how many people reach out to me about it. So and babies also feel it. Babies feel it. They're born conscious, they're born fully aware and fully alert. And they know, just because they're nonverbal doesn't mean they don't know what's going on. So even when we have an emergency, it's very important to have trauma sensitive care providers that can understand the emotional impact and of the whole experience for both the mother and the baby, and can take care of them with that sensitivity in mind, even when we're dealing with an emergency, right? Because that's a scary thing for anybody dealing with it.
It is. I can remember when I find out that every time I found out I was pregnant, it was like a death sentence. That's how I felt. I was excited about having a new baby, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I lost control from that moment on what I could eat, what I could do, how I could live my life, right? And then I love that you talk about putting on that gown, because the minute I put on that gown, it was like I had to give up all control. They owned me, and they made the calls on my life choices or my birthing choices. And I never related it to that, but that was a beautiful way to relate it, because it is like, why couldn't I wear or not wear what I wanted.
You can.
Well,
you see, that's another thing that I'm very big on. This is your autonomy, your body, your baby, your birth. You have the power to say, you know what, I want to wear my own clothes. I mean, it's actually, you have the power to say, to refuse a lot of things and to say, this is the kind of birth I want. And I've had amazing stories of people coming back to me and they say, oh, after reading your book and taking your course and all this, they got their doctor who only does cesarean and never heard of natural birth to allow them to, they should be allowed to just have a vaginal natural birth, and be there just in case in the background. I've had people tell, like, the doctor didn't know how to do that. They weren't into it, but not to be just respectfully. She respectfully spoke up. She was empowered. She said what she wanted, and he just was fine with it. And do you know how much that not just changed her, but changed him and the kind of care he's good. It's a ripple effect. That's how we're going to make change.
I agree.
We encourage the families.
I don't feel like women feel like they have that voice. And so when I was having babies, there was no such thing as a birth plan. Your birth plan was when your contractions were such and such, you showed up. If your water broke, you showed up. And then you followed, your regular scheduled visits. That was your birth plan. There was no plan. And so I love that you, by the way, for those of you who are a planner like me, just know that your plan could change and be okay with that.
Expect the unexpected, but it definitely have to make a plan and have that, written out to give to your care provider and your setting, because there's at least 50 things that could be done to you that you may not want, or your baby, or you may want. It's good to have that discussion. Like, some people don't even know what they don't know. So that's what I love doing is, educate, especially the first timers. They just don't know. They just think they're just going to go in and everything's going to be fine. And they have not a clue that all these things are just going to be done for them. But they have a choice in that. And they could say, no, you know what? I don't want that. And a lot of things that are done are not evidence-based, right? They're actually shown to be harmful. So no, you don't want that, right?
I don't think they're evidence-based either. I think they're what protocol. So if you're here, protocol says we do this. If you're here, protocol says we do this. And there is no evidence base. They're just moving the train.
Yeah. So, but we need to practice evidence-based care, because we need to do what has shown to be beneficial, right? The Hippocrates oath that all doctors have to take upon graduation is first do no harm. Right. So when something's not broken, don't fix it. So that's the best intervention in a birth is when everything's going well is first just leave it alone. Don't do anything.
And I feel like, unfortunately, when doctors are in school, I don't think they teach them about the emotional side, what to look for, how emotionally a woman is going to go away from whatever her birth experience has been. And I kind of get that, because there's so much that we have to absorb medically to keep you healthy and safe. But I don't think that they hone in on that.
No, they don't. And that's why the certain countries that have the best outcome are when they use midwives and obstetricians in a team, because obstetricians are surgeons. We need them. We need surgeons. We need in Europe, they're more high risk. So they focus on disease and complications. And we need that for the small minority of people that have that. But the vast majority are low risk, and who's going to address them? So the midwives have that expertise in low risk, and they work together in teams, and that's how we can best serve the childbearing community, right? So if you want to plan cesarean, that's what you want, you're going to go to a surgeon. But if you want a natural birth and go to a surgeon whose expertise is surgery, it's very hard to expect to have this interventive-free, natural, sacred birth where just not. So you have to choose your provider and your setting wisely. So you're in alignment with what you want and is in alignment with what your provider and setting can do. And there's a lot of hospitals where you can make this happen.
Well, I want to definitely address to young women right now who are either thinking about having babies, who are currently pregnant, or maybe have had their first or even second or third and like, well, I'm having another, but I'm not because of my experience. And I first of all, I'm a huge fan of being able to access online knowledge, right? But it can also be very scary and not always accurate. And so I call it Dr. Google, like it never went to school. And
Gotta be careful. Yeah, don't Dr.
yes,
Google. I have
yes.
such funny stories about Dr. Google.
But what would you tell young women who want to who want to have their voice? They want to be heard. They want to have a plan. What would you tell them? Like, what would be the first 3 steps that they can do in moving on that path of having more control over their birth experience and getting the experience that they envision out of that? How would they start? Because I wouldn't have even have known how to start.
So that's why I made my course, right? My Love Your Birth course is in any setting, right? Prepare. Don't wing it. There is not, because this is like running the marathon for your body, or climbing Mount Everest. It really is. And so no athlete or marathon runner just wings it, right? Especially the westernized person, because we're not living in our communities in surrounded by what's normal. Of birth is home, is part of normal life. Most families are in the West are having, except in certain countries in Europe, are having their babies in the hospital. You have to prepare. I don't want you to be in that late 3rd trimester freak out, contacting me or posting on my social media freaking out, or anybody's social media. I don't want you to freak out in the 3rd trimester, like, oh no, or you're hearing all these horrible stories, or even worse, have a horrible experience and then come, with the postpartum trauma. So prepare and practice early on in the pregnancy, but yes, even in the 2nd trimester, even in the 3rd trimester. But the more you prepare, and the more that these techniques, not just prepare with knowledge of what's labor and what to expect, but it's really a shift in how we're thinking. It's a shift in mindset. That takes time. It takes time to develop habits, techniques and ways of being that become so habitual a response to stressor and intense sensations, because labor is you're going to experience extremely intense sensations. The good news is the intense sensations means everything's working right. We're in a culture that Tylenol and Advil and numb and escape and, something's wrong. We have an intense sensation. The word is pain, but I've had people be in ecstasy with their pain, and athletes do it all the time. They transcend their pain. The ballerina dancing and, doing 1 show, 2 shows a day, and the star of the show, believe me, there's pain, but they don't feel it. They don't feel it. They've transcended it. They have a whole different mindset and an attitude and a whole shift in perspective. That can be done. I help everybody do that, but you could do that. So that's what the course is. And then learning techniques. Like, it's kind of like when you feel, the sensations of whatever you want to call them. I've had women call them hugs to the baby. You can call them contractions, but that's only half accurate, because the top is contracting, the bottom is opening. So you can call them expansions. Surges, waves, because they come in waves, and then you have this rest, and then they come in another wave, and then you have a rest. But these waves are intense at the last part of labor, and I want you to prepare for it and know that you're going to be working hard, but you can do anything for a minute and a half. And right? And just keep in the now. Get a now clock. Now. You just stay in the now, but it's what are you going to do when you have those intense sensations? So if you fight it, it's going to make it worse, or stop or slow things down, and just like a surfer. If a surfer fights a wave, it's going to knock the surfer down. But if you're like, hey, I love it. Like, if you could really train yourself. It takes time, but I've seen it all the time. It just, with practice, anyone could do it. Is you learn how to relax and embrace and actually, like, bring it on. This is an adventure. Like, you can love the sensation and intensity of your labor because you have an eye on the goal of, wow, I'm having this baby, and it's such a sacred moment, and you could channel your breath. There's ways of visualization and channeling your breath and spirituality, whatever your practice is, but like, people can transcend their experience and love. I'm not talking about just bear it, right? Love their birth and journey of birth to baby, pregnancy, birth to baby, no matter what happens. Because you make a plan. You want to have your water birth, and you want everybody, your chiropractor or your massage therapist, or you want your best friend, you want your kids in the birth, and you want to you have all these plans. That's great. Envision your dream birth and use all the senses, because you want to have a pleasurable experience. What you want to see and listen to, a playlist, and feel and hear and taste, have all that. But be in the moment, flexible. Don't get attached to any kind of birth plan. Plan it. Make sure you want to that and visualize it, and do your preparations. Communicate that to your provider in your setting. When you're in it, you kind of have to surrender, because then you're not in control. And that's the journey of birth and pregnancy that if we didn't learn that from COVID, we definitely still have it from birth, is that we aren't in control at all. The only thing we can control is our reaction to what, a lot of what, comes our way. And, the deeper you get, I'm very into Dr. Joe Dispenza. I mean, we can actually control, if you go into the fourth dimension, we can actually that's a whole other topic. We can actually have an impact on our life. But what we can really control is our thoughts, and the emotions, and our reactions, and our habits that we want to entertain. Because we can let a thought go, or do we want to,
I
play that record?
Have loved this episode. Like, it is amazing. Tell us really quickly where we can find you.
So, I have two websites. One is homesweethomebirth.com, and the other is a membership site, holisticbirthandlifenetwork.com, where we have live support groups, and be teaching yoga once a week, and some other, like a lot of live, video tidbits, and there's a lot more action like that for members. But my website that has been there that's more of the membership site. It's very exciting, because we're connecting industry professionals, as well as people anywhere along the journey of planning a pregnancy, expecting, postpartum, beyond. We have people that are done having kids, and they just love being, because before COVID, for so many years, I had support groups in my, people just didn't know anybody else like them that wanted to have a holistic experience, or have a natural birth with a midwife in a hospital or home or something. Well, I knew a lot of people like them, so I connected them, and then they're best friends for life. The kids play, and they share, they recycle things, but you can still do this online, right? So
and the other website.
And the link to the membership community is on my homesweethomebirth.com website.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And we're going to have all the links to everything for Anne in the show notes. You can just go to the show notes and grab wherever you want to connect with her. But I definitely encourage you to check out her Instagram page. It is beautiful. I literally cried on Mother's Day when I looked at it.
I never expected it to get it's like 100. It's got a crazy amount of following. I don't know, 101,000. I never expected that. It was just
because it was beautifully done. You did a beautiful job. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast. Make sure to visit Jana's website, bestholisticlife.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, or listen there, so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you simply tell a friend about the show. That'll help too. Let's change the world together, one health expert at a time. Looking forward to seeing you next time.